Tonight, more Liberal Party faithful plant their flag for who they want to see as the next Prime Minister. As Decision Day draws closer, new names throw their support behind Mark Carney.
I seem to be the choice of many of the Liberal MPs.
The double-edged sword drawing criticism along with encouragement. Deficit dilemma. Is the U.S. really propping up Canada?
When we export oil to the U.S., we export jobs.
We separate the myths from reality in Donald Trump's trade claims.
Let's go Scepters!
State of play in the PWHL.
Shoot scores!
The Women's League finds a winning formula in its second season. And it's game on.
A lot of it is just like the little details.
The biggest video game event hits Canada, how creators are expressing their pixelated passions.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. The Liberal leadership race is picking up steam, with 3 more cabinet ministers throwing their support behind former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney. But as prominent Liberals select their pick, it has others questioning if Carney is the political outsider he says he is. CTV's Colton Prale reports.
Mark Carney shedding some more light on his leadership platform, promising to answer whether he would keep the carbon tax or not by the end of the week.
Canadians are going to know exactly what we intend to do by the end of the leadership, and we're going to roll it out, and they're going to be detailed.
Speaking in Toronto today, Carney added to his quickly growing support from the Liberal cabinet.
Mark Carney is the leader that Canada needs.
Transport Minister Anita Anand, Housing Minister Nate Erskine-Smith, and Defense Minister Bill Blair all say he's the right man to lead their party and the country. But just outside the same event, Conservative Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman argues he's anything but.
He is the ultimate insider who claims to be an outsider.
Throughout his campaign, Carney has repeatedly referred to himself as an outsider.
I know I'm not the usual suspect.
I am an outsider.
I'm not a politician.
But challenging Carney's position as an outsider is the amount of support he's receiving from the inside. 16 Liberal ministers are throwing their support behind Carney, while just 5 are backing their former cabinet colleague, Chrystia Freeland.
There's certain amount of baggage that will go with all those endorsements, but at the end of the day, I think Canadians are going to look at him and say, well, he's not Justin Trudeau.
And that may be enough. New polling shows Canadians' negativity about the direction of the country is at an 18-year high, and voters are looking for change.
It speaks to how Canadians, or why Canadians feel the way they do about the Liberals, and how difficult it will be for the Liberals in the next election.
Whether it's Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, or Karina Gould, Liberal leadership candidates are looking to distance themselves from the negativity attached to Justin Trudeau. Meanwhile, Conservatives are ramping up efforts to tie them all to the current Prime Minister. Heather.
CTV's Colton Prale in Ottawa. U.S. President Donald Trump has made repeated claims about a massive trade deficit with Canada, or a subsidy, as he often calls it. With his tariff threat looming large, understanding the economic reality of the Canada-U.S. trade relationship is critical. CTV's Jeremy Sharon breaks down the numbers for us.
Just days into his second term in the White House, Donald Trump has repeatedly taken aim at Canada on trade.
Canada has been very tough to deal with over the years, and it's not fair that we should have a $200 billion or $250 billion deficit.
It's a justification for his tariff threat, but also for his proposed solution, which he claims to have presented to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
I asked him what would happen if we didn't do that, if we didn't subsidize Canada. He said we'd be a failed nation. And I said, then you should be a state.
Trump claims America doesn't need the goods it's importing from our country. But is the U.S. actually subsidizing Canada, as Trump claims?
They know that a trade deficit is not a subsidy. If anything, it's the rest of the world subsidizing America.
I haven't seen the check arrive in Ottawa from Washington, D.C., made out to the Canadian government.
And what about the deficit numbers?
The man lies the way some people breathe.
The data is pretty straightforward when it comes to trade. In general, Canada does sell more to the U.S. than the U.S. sells us, driven in large part by U.S. imports of Canadian energy. In 2023, the U.S.'s trade deficit with Canada was just over $40 billion. In 2024, it's projected to be about $45 billion, a relatively small number when compared to the roughly $1 trillion in goods and services that cross the border both ways each year.
Mr. Trump quite literally just makes these numbers up, and they can change from one day to the next. 100 billion, 200 billion, 300 billion. It's like a game show.
And how does Canada stack up with other countries? Figures from 2023 show the U.S.'s trade deficit with Canada was only the 10th largest, significantly smaller than that of countries like China and Mexico, despite Canada being America's largest export market. In fact, if you take away Canada's single largest export product, crude oil, the U.S.'s deficit with Canada becomes a surplus.
Think of every dollar of the deficit with the U.S., and it's mostly oil. Think of every dollar as a contribution to a job in the U.S. We don't refine oil in Canada. The Americans.
While the data doesn't back up Trump's claims on trade, experts say he's likely to keep making them a clear negotiating tactic that helps make his case for tariffs. Heather?
Jeremy, thank you. The threat of tariffs, as you can imagine, has been stirring up anxiety at businesses across the country. And as CTV's Sarah Plowman reports, making matters worse is the uncertainty about how it will all play out.
Building machines is a complex puzzle of thousands of steps and parts. What's puzzling factory floors these days is what will President Trump send down the assembly line?
If he's putting 25% on tariffs on our machines, they will increase the price.
These machines are used to make windows and shipped throughout Canada and the U.S.
Cylinders.
Lots of its pieces are imported from the States. If a Trump tariff is met by a Canadian counterpunch, these machines will face a double dose of tariffs.
That's not good. No, it will hurt. Yes, absolutely. We are prepared.
Right now, business owners are bracing.
It's very stressful. It's very, very stressful to know that tariffs might be going up 25%. It's a huge number.
As soon as Trump said tariff, entrepreneurs were searching how to swap American ingredients for Canadian ones to make their beard grooming products.
If these tariffs go through, unfortunately, we would have to cut ties with our relationships and our partners that we have in the United States. It just, from a financial point of view, it wouldn't make sense.
Not an easy move, but a necessary one.
We have to do what we have to do to maintain our cost of goods so that we can continue to supply a product that is a reasonable price and maintain the quality of our ingredients.
This is Lori Tanita.
So this is the front shoe, this is the hind shoe.
He sells horseshoes and tools across the prairies, mostly imported products from the U.S.
There's no other manufacturer in North America that makes this stuff. That's the thing, there's nowhere else to go.
A major hurdle businesses are facing right now is the X factor. How do they navigate through so much uncertainty? Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
One of Donald Trump's key cabinet picks, Pete Hegseth, is now in office after pulling out a narrow victory in the Senate.
The duties of the office of which I am about to enter.
So help you God?
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
Hegseth is now the U.S. Secretary of Defense, having been sworn in by Vice President J.D. Vance. Vance was the one who broke a 50-50 tie among senators, deciding if Hegseth would get the office. He had faced fierce opposition from Democrats and even some Republicans over allegations of heavy drinking and aggressive behavior towards women. A Canadian rapper recently acquitted on murder charges has been arrested as part of a firearms investigation. 26-year-old Hassan Ali, also known as Top 5, was picked up by Toronto police on Friday, along with another man. The rapper is facing several weapons charges. He had been released from custody last year after spending 3 years in jail, waiting to go to trial for first-degree murder connected to a 2021 shooting. Ontario is gearing up for an early election set to be officially underway in just a few days. This weekend, Premier Doug Ford's PC party is gathering for an event being referred to as a super caucus. CTV's Rahim Ladani has more.
Inside this Holiday Inn near Toronto Pearson Airport, the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party is gathering its candidates and campaign managers to map out a plan and lockdown strategy ahead of next month's snap election. A memo obtained by CP24 describes the meeting as a super caucus, telling members, as we face the unprecedented threat posed by a potential trade war with the United States, it is more important than ever to be prepared for an election to secure a strong mandate from the voters. This meeting will provide you with the tools, training, and resources needed for a winning election campaign and position our party for success.
If indeed this is the compelling reason, then this would be the worst time to call an election, because Trump will probably introduce his tariffs right in the middle of the election campaign, and then no one will have a mandate immediately on the provincial level to be able to confront that reality.
Premier Doug Ford has confirmed he will trigger an election on Wednesday, sending voters to the polls on February 27th, more than a year before the next provincial election was scheduled. The move has sparked some similarities to 1990, when Ontario's then Premier David Peterson called an early election. Voters viewed it as opportunistic, and his Liberal majority government fell to the NDP and leader Bob Rae. However, more than 30 years later, political pundits believe Ford can afford the risk.
He's still got more than a quarter of his mandate from the last time left. But I mean, yeah, like, is it going to backfire? He could stand, actually, for some voters to get angry about it, and it's still not put a dent in his lead, really.
The Ontario Liberals are hoping their team will be able to deliver more than a dent on Ford's stronghold. The party announcing Dr. Rose Zacharias and former Toronto Deputy Chief of Police Peter Yun have been named campaign co-chairs. Zacharias, a former president of the Ontario Medical Association, will be a candidate for Barrie Springwater Oro-Medonte, while Yun, who served 35 years with Toronto Police, will serve as a candidate for Scarborough Agincourt. The Premier has said he will visit the Lieutenant Governor next Tuesday, giving all parties 28 days to officially campaign. Rahim Ladani, CTV News.
A sailor with the Royal Canadian Navy has died after a boat capsized off the shores of Halifax. 2 sailors were operating an inflatable boat in the Bedford Basin Friday night when the vessel capsized. A pair of Canadian Coast Guard ships were dispatched to rescue them, pulling both from the frigid waters. The sailors were rushed to hospital. Unfortunately, one of the sailors could not be resuscitated. The commander of the Canadian Fleet Atlantic says the Navy is profoundly saddened by the loss. Turning now to the Middle East, and an emotional day with Israeli hostages released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners as the ceasefire deal continues to hold. Powerful moments when 4 young women were reunited with their families. The Israeli soldiers, known as the Watchtower Girls, unarmed spotters taken captive during the October 7th attack. Before their release, Hamas had them march on stage in costume uniforms, then handed them over to the Red Cross. Reunions also for Palestinian families. Massive crowds in the West Bank cheered as 200 Palestinian prisoners were released in exchange for the hostages. They included militants serving life sentences for their parts in deadly attacks on Israel. Those whose offenses were considered too serious were transferred to Egypt.
Hamas failed to meet its obligations to first release Israeli female civilian hostages as part of the agreement.
Israel is now accusing Hamas of breaching the ceasefire agreement by not releasing civilian hostage Arbel Yahoud, saying it won't allow Palestinians to return to northern Gaza until she is freed. Hamas says the 29-year-old is still alive and will be released next week. Coming up, history on ice.
Go, Sectors, go!
The secret to success as the PWHL scores big with fans. Plus, it's game on for tech competitors at the top of their league. A huge victory for 2 Canadian alpine skiers who climbed onto the podium in an historic finish in Austria.
Trying to live among the legends. Jack Crawford.
James Crawford raced across the finish line to win the prestigious World Cup downhill in Kitzbühel, Austria. The first Canadian to do so in 42 years. And he wasn't a lonely Canuck. The 27-year-old from Toronto shared the podium with his third-place teammate Cameron Alexander of North Vancouver. The last Canadian winner of the iconic downhill course was Todd Brooker in 1983. It's been another history-making day in the Professional Women's Hockey League, once again hitting the ice at Scotiabank Arena in Toronto for a sold-out crowd. And as CTV's Kamal Karmali shows us, with excitement on the rise, there seems to be no end to where this league can go.
Let's go, Sectors!
Here outside the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto,
Go, Sectors, go!
there are countless stories of girls.
My team can someday be this good and play here.
And women.
The skill level now of women coming out of university and college compared to when I was that age is amazing. We are underway.
Inspired by the Professional Women's Hockey League.
Shoot, scores!
Playing in one of the biggest arenas in Canada and to a sold-out crowd of more than 19,000 people.
It just exposes more people to the game, and it shows how we can put on a show in this incredibly professional atmosphere.
Last season, Toronto played to a sellout crowd against Montreal, breaking an all-time attendance record globally for a women's hockey game. Today, back at the Scotiabank Arena, the capacity crowd not record-breaking, but more than twice the size of their usual home at Coca-Cola Coliseum. They gave them a victory and plenty to cheer about.
Anytime you get to play in front of a crowd like this, it's extra special.
The crowds here at Scotiabank Arena show just how much the game has grown and is now ready for expansion, with the league testing out other markets this season.
There are 9 games being played at neutral sites across North America. Vancouver showed it's ready with a sellout for its first ever PWHL game. No seats left in Edmonton or Quebec City either. The PWHL has promised 2 expansion teams for next season, with Vancouver and Calgary among the cities being considered. And with this level of excitement, it seems like continuing to grow the game will be the goal for generations to come. Kamal Karamali, CTV News, Toronto.
Still ahead, diagnostic delays. One patient's painful wait as a tumor grew undetected. A warning tonight for people who have traveled through Canada's busiest airport this week. They may have been exposed to measles. Officials at Toronto's Pearson International Airport say travelers on a Turkish Airlines flight that arrived at Terminal 1 on Wednesday evening may have been exposed to the virus. People are being advised to watch for symptoms. This is the 3rd time in recent months a possible measles exposure has been reported at the airport. It is one of the most commonly prescribed diagnostic procedures, but across the country, people are having to endure painful wait times to get an MRI. Among them, a woman we spoke with nearly a year ago who needed a life-altering surgery to remove a tumor that had grown undetected. CTV's Garrett Berry has an update on her story.
Even the most routine tasks, tidying and folding laundry, take a little bit longer now, as Alana McDonald wrestles with dizziness and other symptoms almost every day.
First thing in the morning when I wake up, I'm nauseous, I have a headache.
It's been 10 months since McDonald flew to Halifax for an invasive surgery that kept her sedated a whole day. When she woke up, some, but not all, of a tumor that had grown on her vestibular nerve had been removed. She was sent home with restrictions and a warning that life may never be the same.
It sucked. And my little boy was 2 at the time, my youngest, so it was really hard to explain to him, no, you can't sit on mommy, you have to sit next to me.
Lately, her symptoms have gotten stronger. Her doctor believes that's due to follow-up radiation therapy, not any tumor growth. But it's been devastating.
I can't live like that forever. It's why I did the surgery. It's super upsetting. I'm kind of at this place where it's really hard.
It's hard not to get frustrated. Alana waited for months to get an MRI scan. All the while, the tumor in her head grew. And across the country, according to the most recent national data available from 2023, wait times for diagnostic imaging are getting worse. 7 days longer on average for MRI scans than a similar period in 2019.
Patients need to have timely access to the right imaging test at the right time in order to know exactly what's happening with their health.
The Canadian Association of Radiologists says it's always lobbying the federal government for funding for equipment upgrades and for training programs to recruit new doctors into the profession. As for McDonald, she says she's learned how important it is to advocate for yourself inside the healthcare system to try to get answers as fast as you can. Garrett Berry, CTV News, St. John's.
Still ahead, gamers unite. We see what it takes to create the play-by-play from scratch. Finally for us tonight, the Ultimate Gaming Challenge. Tens of thousands of participants across hundreds of cities have just 48 hours to build a video game from the ground up. A daunting task even for those in the industry. So we sent CTV's Alison Bamford to a global game jam in Saskatoon to see what it's all about.
Well, it's already looking pretty good.
Spend enough time around video games like William Morant and you get a feel for what makes a good one.
It's surprisingly a lot of it is just like the little details.
Oh, I like the bubble art and the juiciness of the bubbles.
He's making quick work of a 48-hour gamer challenge, one of dozens here hoping to submit a finished product by the end of it.
They'll just keep going through this over and over again until, well, either they die or they beat you.
Connor Tammy is the brains behind the enemies in his game, literally. He developed their artificial intelligence in just 20 minutes, turning whiteboard diagrams into code that determines the enemy's actions.
This is what this looks like in the actual code. This isn't like ChatGPT AI, because that gets really complicated. But this is more just like making an enemy think, I guess, but they're not very smart.
In the gaming world, AI can be a touchy subject.
People are worried that it's going to affect the industry.
Mostly by taking away jobs, but these developers don't see it as a threat, rather a tool.
If a piece of code isn't working, I can put it into one of these AIs and be like, hey, what's wrong with this?
The stuff that AI creates is not, I wouldn't consider it really good enough to sell to anybody, so not yet.
The games made here aren't necessarily looking to be sold.
And you're trying to escape the maze.
Some developers are brushing up on their skills, others are diving into what they hope could be their future.
If I could get to draw for a career, that would be amazing.
Some games won't finish in time, that's just how it goes. But at the end of the weekend, whatever does make it on the screen, they'll simply call a work of art. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
Some creative minds. That is our newscast for this Saturday night. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. I'm Heather Butts. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast.